In today's video, I'm going to give you 3 tips if you are just getting started out, and make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to give a bonus tip that I also think is extremely important. What's up everybody, my name is Adam from Herosforsale, and over the past 3 years, I've been making a ton of sports card content across a ton of different social media platforms. So if you like sports cards, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and if you learned anything or have any questions, make sure you leave it in the comments. When we're talking about sports cards, I think it's important to realize that there are going to be some tried and true ways to, whether you're making money or making sure you're not losing money within sports cards, and here are some good tips that I think will help you with your journey if you're just getting started. So here's the first one. The first one is going to be start small. So that has a couple different meanings in my opinion. You could start small by the amount of money that you're spending, or you could start small with the amount of research that you're doing. Because I think in the sports card industry, it's so huge right now and it's become such a large industry that if you try and just learn everything within sports cards, I think it's almost going to be impossible to learn the market in just the first time you're doing the research. So when you're starting small with doing research, what I suggest doing is either taking one player or 1 year's worth of products and kind of learning the market from that standpoint and learning a specific, I would say start with a player, because what you want to do is you want to learn that player's rookie cards from that year, and then you're going to get a good grasp on what products and what the pricing of these products are. So like if you like Luka Doncic, I would go to eBay and just search 2018 Panini Luka Doncic and then look at some of the cards and start almost from the top, like take one card and then put that card in the search bar. If you're getting started out in basketball, I would probably start out with one of these products, but here are the top 5 products you can kind of look at and get a gauge of what the market's going to look like. Prism, Optic, Hoops, Select, and Donruss. Those are probably my top 5 products that you're going to see the most volume on sales, so that's where you're going to get a good gauge on what the price is for those specific products. If you're looking for baseball, you probably want to start out with Bowman Chrome, the regular Topps flagship set, and then Topps Chrome. I think those are probably the 3 that are going to be the most mainstream products for baseball that you can really start out with. And then the other thing about money, I just think that what's going to happen is you're going to want to buy all the cards that you're seeing. And I think you should really make sure you're using a budget when you're doing this, and don't go crazy and don't buy all the cards, because what that's going to do is you're going to buy a card and you're probably going to buy the wrong one, or you're going to make a mistake. And actually that's the second tip that I'm going to go over today, is that you're going to be making mistakes, so expect to make mistakes when you're first getting started out. I can't even tell you how many times I can go back to some of my early eBay purchases and look at that and realize that this wasn't the card that I meant to buy. Or when I was getting into soccer, which that's a whole different conversation. I'm not even going to get into soccer at this point. But when I was getting into soccer, I was looking into what rookie cards were the right ones to buy, and there was a ton of times where I just bought the wrong card. So you're going to make a mistake, so that's why starting small is important, because, if you're starting out and you're buying cards for $10 to $15 to $20 and you make a mistake, that's okay, because you're kind of losing a small amount of money. But if you're out here buying $1,000 or even $100 cards and you end up buying the wrong one, that's going to probably hurt a lot more to your bankroll or your budget or whatever you have than if you're just buying some of these smaller cards. And by buying the smaller cards, what you're going to be able to do is you can go to eBay and you can actually filter by pricing. So once you kind of have gotten a good feel for what the prices and how they compare to different sets, if you're looking at basketball, if you're looking at Prism compared to Donruss, or Optic compared to Select, and you have a good gauge on what you think a good price for the card is going to be, that's when you can kind of maybe even find a card that's maybe in your price range if you're looking, and then you can start using those filters on eBay to filter the amount of money that you're going to be wanting to spend on either a buy it now auction or a regular auction that's a 7-day or a 3-day, however you want to look at it. Tip number 3, I would say, is going to be extremely important, and that's to buy the cards that you want to buy. Right now, there's so much content within sports cards, and the amount of content has grown pretty substantially over the past 2 years. And I think one of the main content themes you're going to see is my top 3 guys to buy, or my top 2, or my top 5 guys to invest in. And I think those videos are good and important to watch, but make sure that if you are watching those videos, just know that there's probably a good chance that those people have already bought in at a price that's lower than what you're going to be buying it at. But it's also important to just realize that like they're not going to be right all the time. Like also, I just think that that's why when I'm sort of doing that type of video, I always like to preference that like my opinion on a player is going to be just as accurate or in the future as probably your opinion on that same player, like, or your opinion on a different player. Like there are some people that really like, CeeDee Lamb for the Cowboys, or there's people that really like, there's tons of other players, and that's just one example because on TikTok I kind of get that comment a lot, like, what do you think of CeeDee Lamb? And I think he's fine, but I just don't think my opinion on him is going to be necessarily correct based off of how much research I've done. But I just think what you're going to see is that a lot of people give advice on what cards to buy, and they're going to be just as correct about what their predictions are as probably you are. Because when it comes to sports and within sports cards, once you get a good gauge of the market, analyzing talent is like, people aren't scouts. Like, and it's even when you follow scouts, or if you follow people during the NBA draft, like, everybody is the next LeBron James in the NBA draft, and no one ends up turning out to be the next LeBron James. So it's like, you kind of want to look for an opportunity to buy a player for a certain price, and if you see them having a more heightened role on their team, that's maybe an opportunity where you could buy. I mean, something, for example, that I like, if we're talking basketball cards, is like, I like a guy who's maybe the third or fourth best player on a team that's in a big market. And I think Jason Tatum was this was Jason Tatum example I would have used 2 years ago, is like the third or fourth best player, a young player that's kind of in an emerging or a big market that like has the opportunity to be the best player on their team. So like Tatum, for example, was exactly that. But there are tons of times that I can find examples where I thought a player was going to be good and then he doesn't end up being good. But and that's kind of where another example where it's like, you don't want to, and we'll go back to one of the first tips, is like going small and not going all out. Like if you were to go all out on a player that you like and spend $1,000, that's $1,000 that you're not going to be able to spend on a player who maybe emerges and maybe has a little bit more tape, because that's what ends up happening with a lot of quarterbacks and a lot of rookies, is they just have a ton of hype coming into the season. And that's why you see some of the prices of these rookies be a lot higher than like players that are in the league now. Like, you're just going to see a lot of higher prices on some of these rookies compared to like a sixth man, or a sixth man who has a potential to be kind of in that conversation. But in my opinion, I think it's really a risk or reward type situation there, where if you can find a player who's maybe in their third or fourth year, they haven't been great, and they're, like I said, if they're in a market that's a really good market and they're the third or fourth best player on the team and they have a chance to be the best player on their team, that's, I think, a good opportunity if you are kind of looking at a different player, or looking at a player and how well they're going to do over the course of the season. I just think that those are kind of examples of players that I like, and that's only one example. Like, you probably, like I said, your analysis on a player is going to be just as good as mine, or going to be just as good as anybody else who's making that type of video where they're giving you examples of cards that you should be buying, which, like I said, I think they have a place in the hobby, but I think at this point, over the past 2 years, I just hope people don't get sucked into those types of videos, because over the past 2 years, we really have seen anybody make money. Like, you really had to be buying at a very specific time and selling at a very specific time to lose any type of money within sports cards. So like, basically everyone's predictions over the past 2 years have panned out and have been very correct, of like, this player's cards are going to go up in value, or this player is going to have a great season. And I think also what we saw last year going into this year is we're kind of seeing the first full new cycle of sports coming back, because what happened last year with sports was that we had like a 6 to 12 month period where like everyone had potential, and then sports kind of shut down. So it's like, you look at that and you say, anybody could have made any prediction at the beginning of 2020, and if they had sold at the end of 2020, they would have made a ton of money, because we were still looking at tons of potential. And I think even looking at the seasons that we had that year, like there was so much, obviously, the shutdowns and everything affected the league so much that we were still kind of running on potential for a lot of these players. Like, there was still, the third-year rookie that's like the 8th or ninth man on the bench, like you could look at that player and say, well, he has potential because of this reason or that reason, when realistically they were just not good and they didn't actually have that potential. And the fourth and bonus tip that I have for you today is going to be trying to diversify where and when you're buying cards. Like, go onto a bunch of different platforms, try a bunch of different things. Like maybe you enjoy trying to find retail, so maybe try and do that, or like buying retail and flipping that, or buying cards raw and getting them graded kind of once PSA opens back up and the grading and all that kind of stuff, but like buying raw cards and getting them graded. Or maybe you like buying PSA 9s, or maybe you like buying on a different platform than eBay, or maybe you like StarStock, or Check Out My Cards, or all, like there are tons of different platforms now compared to where there was 2 years ago. So I think there is a ton of potential on these platforms for you or for somebody to look and buy. So I think for my bonus tip here, it's going to be try and take some of the money that you were looking at on eBay and try out some different platforms and see if you like it. Because if you like StarStock or you like Check Out My Cards, where they store the cards for you, you don't get them shipped, like that potentially could be a way that you enjoy buying and selling cards more than like buying the card and getting it shipped to you and then having to then ship the card back out. So or if it's like buying and getting them graded. I think there's tons of different options within sports cards of ways to buy and sell and buy and grade. That my bonus tip here is just going to be, instead of just focusing on one platform, kind of once you get your feet wet a little bit, not right away, because there's tons of different platforms and it can be confusing. But like once you kind of get a good feel for the market and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be trying a bunch of different things, trying a bunch of different platforms. So those are my 3 tips, plus a bonus tip if you're just getting started into sports cards. So make sure you like and subscribe on this video. And if you haven't followed on Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram, make sure you do that as well. Thank you all for listening and watching, and I will see you in the next one.